Hi, Jake.
You doing it, Campbell? Are you away also?
I'm away. I'm in Rhode Island.
Great. Unfortunately, I guess this might be our last Zoom meeting, but we'll see. Hopefully they'll do it another month anyhow.
I'm glad it extended in the summer anyway, because that
Yeah.
Makes it easier, yeah.
Well, Elise, what do we do when we have a meeting and we don't have the applicant?
Well, why don't you go ahead and start the meeting if there's any other business you can take care of?
Sure.
And then we'll see if the applicant shows up.
Okay,
I'm gonna send him a reminder now.
okay. I'd like to make a motion to open the BZA meeting of,
so moved. Second.
all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Did everyone have a chance to look at the minutes to the meeting of June 13th?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, does anyone have any issues with that or?
No.
All right, then I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes to the meeting of June 13th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Well, let's give the applicant a little more time. I do note that this was published for a public hearing. I don't know if anyone from the public is here, but
I see one, Mark Citron is here.
okay.
Others are coming. One moment.
Okay, Jay Wright Scott is here.
Sure. Now, do we see them up on our screen or what?
Only their names,
Oh,
not their faces.
okay.
John, did you hear anything from the applicant?
No, I just emailed him 30 seconds ago.
Does anyone have a phone number for him? Or her?
One moment. One moment. I'm looking for a cell phone number.
I have a phone number on the application. 917.
Hmm?
John, do you have that? Maybe we should try giving the applicant a call.
Can you read it off to me and I'll call him?
Yes, 917-328-8210.
Hello, Adam. This is John from the village office. I think you just logged into the meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, I did just find it. I apologize, I'm a little bit late.
Okay, I just let you in. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Okay.
Adam is logged in.
Hello.
Okay, I'd like to read the notice. The Village of Tuxedo Park Board of Zoning Appeals notice of public hearing, the application of Adam Farmery and Jasmine Francis Farmery, tax map number 107-1-75.2, located at 119 Laurel Road, Tuxedo Park, New York, seeking relief from section 100-18A, where a fence is required to be no closer than 2 feet from the property line. And the site plan that was submitted indicates a fence setback of 1 foot from the property line. John, do we have proof of mailings?
Yes, we did receive proof that they were mailed out. And we received the receipt of, I believe, 5 out of the 9 cards.
Okay. If that's the case, Adam, are you going to present as the applicant?
Yes.
Then it's your floor.
Thank you. Yeah, so just to give you a little bit of history, and I wrote this in the letter that I had submitted to BZA, but when COVID hit, we had, like many families throughout the United States, decided to take that time and opportunity to spend a little bit of energy sort of making our homes a little bit better, sort of upgrading our homes. And so as part of that, we decided to apply for the construction of a pergola in our back garden, which we applied through John Ledwith and got a permit for the pergola, passed the BAR, and proceeded to construct the pergola. At the same time, as we were sort of constructing that, we decided that we wanted to sort of construct a fence along the property line with our neighbor and plant some trees. And so when we went about, and at the time we were unaware that we actually had to apply for a permit for that. We knew that we had to apply for permits for larger constructions, didn't realize that we had to apply for a permit for that. So when John came and did his final inspection for the pergola in the back garden, he saw the fence on the side garden and said, "Hey, that's a problem. You now need to sort of go about and get a permit for this fence." That was a while ago. In sort of putting this together, we had initially installed a fence that the BAR, as well as our neighbors, thought a part of it was a problem. And so we've since taken down that section of fence, but there's a section of fence that we'd like to essentially memorialize through the application to the BZA, which is shown in the site plan, which is effectively a fence which is 4 foot tall, 52 foot long, very handsome. The BAR has already heard this and has approved it as far as the look and feel of that fence. It's really just a matter of the fact that we did not set it back the appropriate setback. And during the time that we were looking at it, we were chatting with our neighbors about this. They even went so far as and were nice enough to get one of their surveyors to come actually mark the line out for where the fence was, or where the property line should be. We discussed it. At the time, our neighbor did point out to us that they thought that we needed to pay attention to the village code, that it needed to be set back 2 feet. I suggested at that time, and I still suggest to this day, that there are a lot of situations in the park in which case there are precedent examples in which the fences are not always set back 2 feet on the side gardens. And I cited the majority of houses along Clubhouse Road being a good example of that. When you have a very small side yard that is contiguous between 2 houses, it appears that there are concessions for that. And so that's why we went about and put the fence where we did. So I do recognize that it was wrong not to apply for a permit now. It was wrong not to have to go in front of the BAR, and now we're coming in front of the BZA in order to rectify our mistake.
Adam, I have a question. The survey that you submitted,
Yeah.
is an old survey. It's not a current survey. In other words, you've taken your old survey and drew some where the fence is on the property. So I think one of the real issues that we're struggling with here is where exactly the fence is. All right. I mean, obviously, in accordance, if you were going to come to us, quite frankly, to ask for relief, and you haven't presented us with a real survey, I have a problem with that. Okay. I mean, who knows whether you're on his property, on the line, 1 foot away, 2 foot away. All right. I
Yeah.
mean, you're really not giving us, correct information for us to be legitimately make a decision.
I see. I apologize. I had thought that having used the sort of the marking out of the property line that our neighbors had done was sufficient to sort of kind of come to a agreement, but I'm happy to pay for a survey to be done if that's
Well,
what.
obviously, that's problematic because your neighbors don't exactly agree with your position either. I mean, we have correspondence from your neighbors that, feel that this fence is right on the property line, which would be problematic.
I see. And it would be problematic to apply for a variance to put it on the property line?
Correct. If it's on the property line, half of it's on his property.
So
You
I
can
need,
apply for a variance to put it on your side of the property line, but that's not what you're applying for here. Is that correct?
that's correct. I mean, when we installed the fence, we had Beth and Jay were kind enough to mark it out. And we had the fence installer, set it back the 12 inches or so from the property line that we instructed them in order to make sure that we didn't have an issue. If it requires an additional survey in order to come to grips with whether or not this was accomplished by the fence installer, then I mean, I guess I could pay for that to happen.
Elise, how would we deal with this point?
Well, I think the issue here is, unless I'm misreading something, I cannot tell exactly where the fence is, whether it's on the property line, a foot off the property line. So the board can require the applicant to resubmit a survey that marks out specifically where the fence is exactly, and then modify the application for a variance. I would just note that doing so does not mean that a variance will be granted. The variance may not be granted, but here the board doesn't have accurate information, and the board also has conflicting information from the neighbor as to exactly where the fence is, how long, so it needs to be, if the board wishes to proceed with this, a survey would have to be done.
I see. I apologize that I didn't get that ahead of time. Yeah, okay. Yeah, and I also, I do recognize that it's rare for the board to sort of retroactively provide variances. And so I appreciate even hearing this out. In the same way, it was rare for the BAR to hear the application of a fence after it had already been installed, and that they proceeded to hear it out. So I do request that you would continue to hear it out. If I can get a survey that would at least clear this up, so that there's no doubt, I'd be happy to do that.
Elise, should we open the meeting to the public at this point in time?
Well, I think if the other board members have questions, this would be the time, or comments, this would be the time to make them. And then, yes, the public hearing would need to be opened.
Okay. All right, I request then other comments from the board.
You discussed my concerns, and also, I think we also need to, at the appropriate time, whether it's now or a later meeting, is just have a discussion about the other letters that we received and the information they provided.
Pardon? What'd you say, John? Sorry.
The letter we received from the neighbors and the
Right.
information they provided, we have to have a discussion we have to include that in our discussion, whether it's now or later when the survey comes.
Dave Campbell?
I guess, is there anything that would prohibit the wall from being 2 feet back from the property line? Is there any physical constraints in the situation, or was it just set where it was? So I guess I want to understand, is there, because I'm sorry, I haven't visited the property. Is the site one where the fence could be 2 feet back from the property line? Or is that
Yeah,
just-
I mean, there's nothing saying, it's a great question. There was nothing suggesting otherwise, except for, as I mentioned, I have 2 friends that up until about 6 months ago lived on Clubhouse, and I used to visit their houses all the time, and they had fences and or walls in between their neighbors and themselves. And it seemed as though that was an appropriate solution for Tuxedo Park, relative to when you had a very small side yard to be dealing with. And so it felt as though that the notion of putting a fence back 2 feet seemed antithetical to common sense.
Well, our code is our code, and the thing is that it's kind of, you really can't judge what went on Clubhouse Road. Those fences could be there for 50 years, and they may have gotten a permit, they may have gotten a variance, whatever. But to say, oh well, there's fences on property lines other places, really doesn't set a precedent unless you know the specific example of every single one.
No, that's fair. But, I was part of the BAR meeting that we attended to try to approve the look and feel of this fence. There was somebody else applying for a fence on Clubhouse Road. And when asked whether or not the fence was up, set back from the property, the gentleman said, yeah, kind of. And that was kind of the end of it. There was asked, do the neighbors have a problem with it? And he said, no, in which case he was approved. So all I'm saying is that I think that there's probably a lot of fungibility that's occurring with not necessarily the scrutiny that's being held to account in this particular case, because of the fact that our neighbors wish to apply certain scrutiny.
I would just interrupt here for a second and remind the applicant and the board that, as the chairman said, the code is the code. If there are errors or if there are violations of the code on other properties, that is not a green light for anyone else to violate the code. So I think the chairman makes a good point. Clubhouse Road may very well have pre-existing non-conforming fences that, as long as they're maintained, can remain. And so I would not necessarily say that is a precedent unless you can uncover variances that were granted for those fences. And then we would have to look at the individual variances.
Bravo, Elise.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying that's what the law is. It's, it's not about one side or the other.
I guess the application is a bit, the way it's worded is a bit problematic based on the information that the neighbors provided, because it appears that you were aware that you needed to apply. And then you sent a letter that you were not, and in 2000, the letter seems to say that you were, the email from you. So I'm a little bit confused on, if it's relevant or not, but it's problematic if that's a conflict in what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, in the discussion with the neighbors, they sort of pointed out that there was a code that needed to be followed. And I mentioned to them that I thought that the code was necessarily not necessarily the way that it was held throughout the park. Yeah.
But you also mentioned needing to do an application in that same email. So, kind of after the fact saying you didn't need an application, it seems to not be consistent.
Yeah, no, I apologize. I mean, I think that maybe my memory was not correct, but it felt as though that there was not an application needed at the time, even though there was some discussion of it.
I mean, at this point in time, I mean, you know, if you need to go out and you get a surveyor, you know, obviously you spent money to come before our board. It would have
Sure.
seemed to me the most cost-effective way to solve the problem is to put the fence in the right place.
Yeah, and or at this point, take it down, which seems to be a waste of money, but at the same time, maybe that's, as I mentioned to my neighbor in a call from a week ago, that if that was what the decision was, then we would, go about and take it down. It just seemed a waste of resources and money for a perfectly for a fence that doesn't seem to be harming necessarily anybody.
Well, your neighbor doesn't like it.
Well, at the same time, I didn't like them necessarily coming onto our property and using our property whenever they wanted either. And so that was kind of what predicated putting the fence up. We have a long-standing back and forth issue that
That's too bad, but this zoning board shouldn't have to deal with this kind of thing.
no, I know, and I apologize.
Yes, apologize, please.
If everyone on the board has spoken, then I'd like to make a motion to open up the meeting to the public.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak?
Does that include the neighbors, or it does, right?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Jay, would you like to read your letter at this point in time, or?
I mean, I don't have it in front of me. I wasn't necessarily prepared to read it out. I could find it if you need. I mean,
You might want to just summarize the points you made in your letter. The letter has been entered into the record.
Correct.
I mean, Adam's correct. There's been something of a back and forth here. And when we saw him starting to lay out the fence, we became concerned about where it was. I'm a professional engineer. My wife is a commercial realtor. We've dealt with property line issues professionally in the past. And so we asked that Adam be careful about the line and reminded him about the code. I'm also on the planning board, so I have perhaps a greater knowledge of the code than most folks do. And when it looked like maybe that was still going to be an issue, I got a surveyor out to mark the line so that it would be clear where the property line was, so there wouldn't be confusion. The fence is where it is. I believe that the fence is on the property line. And because of that, we had the surveyors back out, and the survey that I have shows that the fence is on the property line. And I'm not sure there's much argument about the location of the property line. It was a subdivision done recently. This isn't a 100-year-old survey that's done from the axle in the middle of the road kind of thing. And here we are. As I've said from the beginning, I firmly believe that people should have the right to do what they want with their property within the limits of the code. And the BZA exists to balance the rigor of the code against reality. And there are certainly times when variances are necessary to do that.
Can I ask a dumb question?
You may.
What is the worst thing that would happen if the fence was on the property line? What is the worst?
I'm going to interrupt again here. This is not a back and forth. This is a public comment period. I would suggest that if you as neighbors want to speak about the worst thing that could happen, you do that, just the two of you off this call.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is for the benefit of the board and to hear from the public as well as the applicant.
Well, I guess I was asking partially relative to the board as well.
Well, the board will make that decision. This isn't about the worst thing that could happen. This is about the code and a variance from the code or not.
Right, so I'm saying, I guess I'm asking if I was to apply for the fence to be a variance on the property line, is that something that the board would listen to or not?
Well, it's not, when something is on the property line, the line is a thin line. So half the fence is on his property or the neighbor's property, and half the fence is on your property. So, you know.
Within
it's-
reason, it's a 4-inch fence. I mean, as you know, you're talking
Well,
about.
it's two, then 2 inches is on his property and 2 inches is on yours.
I would just say that, again, the board cannot grant a variance that would encroach on someone else's property, even if it's just 2 inches.
That's fair. I understand that.
Is there anyone else in the public that would like to speak at this point in time? At least then I should close the public hearing.
You can, Mr. Chairman, or you can keep it open if the applicant is going to have a survey done and resubmit, then I would suggest that you adjourn the public hearing until the next meeting or his next appearance. Because there'll be new material that the public may wish to comment upon.
And I'll leave the public meeting open. At this point in time, they're really, you know, either, I guess the two options for you, Adam, are either you get us a new survey so we can see where the actual location of the fence is, or like you said, take the fence down, all right, as another option, all right? So I'm not sure, you know, or move the fence 2 feet back
Sure.
and then make an application to the village for a fence. Because you have not, I assume you have not, have you made an application for a fence at this point?
I have, but it's held up in not having BAR approval nor BZA approval. So it's kind of stuck in limbo.
Well, I guess right now you're still stuck in limbo.
Okay. So to your point, I would need to get a survey first, or we would choose to just take the fence down, which, you know, moving it is difficult insofar that there are now 13 evergreen trees that are planted on our side of that fence. So that would mean moving those trees as well, which would be financially unpalatable. So at this point, it's a matter of, you know, sunk cost fallacy and just destroying the fence and not doing anything, which, you know, is one option, or getting the survey. So let me have a think about that.
Sir, if you decide to take the fence down or move it, which it sounds like you can't really move it, and not to reappear before the board, I would ask that you would make a formal withdrawal of your application.
Okay.
Thank you.
That being the case, I'd like to make a motion to close the meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
All right.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Night.
Night, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.